And the first part is just to begin with some deep breathing. Relax, allow the day to pass through you. And whatever troubles you've been holding on to, just let them go for now. Continue breathing deeply. And then along with me say Om. Om is Aum. Aum. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. I offer my respects and obeisances to Vasudev Shri Krishna. Shri Krishnam Sharanam Mama. I surrender unto you, O Krishna. So we begin the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, text number 48, with a very interesting reminder by Krishna. And he points out here that every endeavor is covered by some sort of fault, just as fire is covered by smoke. Have you ever noticed that? Nothing we do is ever perfect. Nothing. You may write a book, you may make a painting, you may write some music, you may do something in your job, or you may do something in your relationship, and somebody will come along and find fault in it. It's almost as if it's inherent. You could write the greatest masterpiece, and sooner or later, someone will come along who finds fault in that. So Krishna is comparing it to fire covered by smoke. That where there is fire, there will be smoke. That whatever we do, there will be some flaw in it. Now, if there's any part of you that wants to be a perfectionist, that wants to get it right, that believes you are right, whether it is about what you've done or whether how you are a person, that's the ego. It wants desperately to be right. It wants desperately to feel good. It wants desperately to prove its point, to prove its worth, to prove its value. Have you ever noticed that the only people who need to prove, or the only thing that needs to prove its value and worth, is one that is insecure about its worth and value? A diamond doesn't need to prove its value. Those who know it know its worth. Those who see a piece of gold and know what it is from fake something, they know its worth. So either the value is known or not known. If you know a thing's value, there's no need to prove it. You know its value. If you don't know it, well, you don't know it. You don't know fake from real. So the ego wants to keep proving its worth and value by great education, great knowledge, great wealth, great beauty, great fame. It wants to prove to the world that I'm something, that I matter, that I'm significant. If you truly mattered, you wouldn't need to prove it. If you truly knew your worth, you wouldn't need to prove it. Our worth is either inherent or we don't know our worth. So the ego is constantly trying to prove this and constantly taunting us for being unworthy, for being not good enough, for being messed up, for being comparing us to other people. There are two realities that exist side by side, if you want to crack this code. The one is that all of us are flawed, messed up, imperfect, and not good enough. This reality exists. None of us is good enough, because good enough is a vague concept. According to whom would you say, are you good enough or not good enough? By what standard would you measure that? You can measure gold by some standard of 24 karat, 22 karat, 18 karat, 14 karat, but how do you measure a person being good enough? By what standard? Is it by the is it by the measure of how many degrees they have? Is it by the measure of how much wealth they have? Is that what makes a person good enough? Then if wealth were measured by, if wealth was the measure of good enough, then Christ had no wealth, Buddha had no wealth. They were not good enough. There are many who are great rulers and emperors who have great wealth and do atrocious things, as we even see today. And it has always been in the past. They have great wealth and they do horrible things. Are they good enough? How would you decide? Is there a standard or is there none? And in a world where there is no standard, really, how would you measure good enough? Is the question even relevant? Is my worth and value something I can really compare to others? If every one of us is different, if every one of us is unique, then how do I compare unique and different things to each other? I can compare similar things, apples to apples, oranges to oranges, but how do I compare one work of art to another work of art? It's so subjective. You are that work of art. You are that unique piece of creation who is unlike any other. There is no one like you or me or any of us. So how can there be comparison? So the whole question is redundant. There is this one reality in which our mind and ego is trying to do these little mind games and messing us up in the process. And then there is another reality, the reality of the soul. And in that world, there is no difference between me and you. In that world, we are the same. In that world, everything about us is perfect, and there is no question of measuring our worth or value. In fact, our worth is intrinsic. Intrinsic. Try to know the difference. Where the world sees worth and value as extrinsic, external, the worth and value of the soul is internal. It is in its very nature worthy. You are in your very essence, in your true self, worthy, regardless of what you do or do not do. It has nothing to do with it. Regardless of how you look or how old you are or how smart you are or what you know, you are worthy. You are incredible. Not for any external reason, but by your inherent value of who you are. So we live in a dichotomy, two worlds. One world that is inherently worthy and another that is trying to prove its worth. There is no resolution here. You must claim your place in one of these worlds. Either you are in the world of the external, or you are in the world of the internal. That is your identity, and therefore that is your worth. Therefore, identity plays such a crucial piece. What is your identity? Therefore, all spiritual teachings begin with this fundamental truth. Who am I? And once you understand who am I, then you begin to understand your worth and value, because it is inherent in here. Because as you feel it and experience it and get to know it, you understand its worth and value. That which you are is a piece and particle of the divine, of God. And therefore it is infinitely valuable, infinitely worthy, infinitely perfect. That's incredible, isn't it? Does anybody have a question about that before I move on? Anybody at all? Want to share something? I see something in the chat here. Okay. All right. So then let's keep going. Every endeavor is covered by some sort of fault, just as fire is covered by smoke. Therefore, one should not give up the work with which is born of his nature, even if such work is full of fault. So, all along, Krishna talks about our unique nature, our unique aptitude, our unique gifts, our unique ability, and that we must follow the path of our unique nature. Many of us, we choose, careers or paths that are not necessarily our true identity. It took me for ages to figure out my own calling, almost into my 40s. That's because there was no true guidance for what that is. And really speaking, your true nature is inherent. It's in you. It's been showing up all along. Let's say you've been a creative person, or you've been artistically inclined or whatever, and then they tell you, oh no, you got to go out and do something else. Like I was told I needed to be an engineer, right? Because I grew up in India, and that's what they tell people. So, especially because you're a little creative, so that must be who you are. But the fact of the matter was that my creativity lay in very different areas, and I had to find that. I had to find, the closer I came to myself, the closer I came to finding what is my true calling and my true path. And the interesting thing was, I'd been doing it all along. I'd been all along, all my life, listening to people, their issues, helping them get to the root of problems, even as a kid. So maybe you want to look at your own life, find your own inherent calling, your own inherent gifts, and then build on that. Build and create a life out of that. Because when you create it from that inner space, the gifts that you truly have, then you'll find yourself extremely satisfied in what you do. I've often said, if you could do a career that you can do if the career you're doing is something you could have done for free, if you would do it anyway, and if it just gives you great delight in doing that, that's the path you need to follow. Then learn, of course, how to make that, support you as well. Of course, you need to do that. So here he's saying that one should not give up the work which is born of your nature, even if in the beginning stages you find that you're not succeeding, or you're not that good at it, or maybe you need to improve, or there's work to be done. Of course there's work to be done, always, for everyone. One can obtain the results of renunciation simply by self-control and by becoming unattached to material things and disregarding material enjoyments. That is the highest perfectional stage of renunciation. So self-control is very important, being able to form discipline. I used to struggle with that. I'd been through a lot of discipline, and then through a lot of rebelling against discipline, and then realizing once again that without discipline you don't get anywhere. Nothing really takes off and nothing really happens. If you're in a job or something, they'll force you. But if you're on your own, if you're independent, then you have to create your own path and your own disciplines within that. So learning to control the mind, learning to control the senses, learning to control and focus your attention is a vital part of success in any field. And as you persevere on your path, like for example, if you were an artist, I remember, how one struggles if you're a writer, if you're a musician. You struggle in the beginning stages because you're not good at what seems to be your calling, but you're not necessarily good at it. You have to perfect your art. You have to find your place. You have to fine-tune the skill that you've been given or the talent that you have. So therein comes being unattached to the outcome of what you're doing. Keep on persevering until you find that sweet spot in which you really find your expression and your voice. It takes a while, but it's a worthy pursuit. because it is the most satisfying of all. So Krishna then he begins with the path of doing your duty, your dharma, that which is your natural calling, and then from there, how do you take that and ascend to the part of self-realization? Hear from me how one can attain the supreme perfectional stage, Brahman, by acting in a way that I shall now summarize. So, in all Vedic literature, that is considered the goal of life. Ask yourself, what is the goal of your life? Is the goal of your life to have a family? Is it to have a house, to have a car, to have some money in the bank, to have a good job? And you might say yes to all of that. But I would argue that in the end, when we talk of the goal of life, there will come a time where all of that drops off. If you have kids, kids grow up. If you have a job, there comes a point where you retire from that job. If your goal is to be famous, there comes a time for every famous person that they're no longer famous. Everything drops off. Everything vanishes. And you're left with you, right into old age, right into the end of your days. And your question then is, what did I achieve? What was the purpose of my life? Why did I come into this world? So the Vedas say that the purpose of human life begins with atato brahma jigyasa, wanting to know the nature of life itself, wanting to know the nature of Brahman. Atato, in the beginning, Brahma, to know about the nature of the divine, of God. Jigyasa, curiosity, seeking, wanting to know. That is the purpose of human life. And it is said that there are, according to the Vedas, 8,400,000 species of life, different types of life forms. There's so many hundreds of thousands of humanoid type life forms, so many different kinds of birds, so many kinds of animals. And it is only after going through these different species of life that one comes to the human birth. And the purpose of this human form of life is that we have the intelligence to begin to inquire about the nature of reality, the nature of who we are, and the nature of God. As an animal, if all you're going to do is eat, sleep, mate, defend yourself, then that you can do as an animal as well. There is no need to be a human. But as a human being, you get this incredible opportunity to inquire deeper. And the reality is very few people do. The majority of people live lives completely disconnected from this inquiry, just trying to survive, just trying to make or try at the other end of the spectrum, make as much as they can, make as much money, as much fame as they can. But very few, Krishna says, out of millions of people, one inquires about the truth. And out of many such, he says, hardly one gets to know me as I am. So, it's a great honor to be with all of you here, because you're the ones who are inquiring, and you're the ones who are here, and you're the ones who want to know the highest truth. The Srimad Bhagavatam defines the highest truth, or the absolute truth, as reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. So when you see the world is that illusion. And within that illusion, when you find the reality is that which is eternal. The reality is that which is imperishable. When you find that is the energy of who we are, the energy of that which we came from, or God, that energy which sustains the entire universe. When you find that reality distinguished from illusion, when you can see the separation between the two, when you can feel that separation, then you have arrived at the absolute truth. The truth is not something relative that is dependent on what I think or you think. The truth is absolute in nature, which means that it doesn't change with time. It doesn't change as a matter of perception. If I perceive the truth, or you perceive the truth of the absolute reality, it will be the same. Just like, even if I take a simple example, if you touch water or I touch water, water is going to feel wet, right? It's the nature of water. But similarly, if I touch the absolute truth, that which lies within, that which lies in the very thread of all creation, the energy of who you are and what this world is, what you will experience and what I will experience will inevitably be the same. Like if you took a deep breath right now, try it. Take a deep breath and just become aware of your inner world. And as you do that, you'll notice a feeling. You go beyond your thoughts and you come into that inner world through your breath. You will notice a feeling of calm, a feeling of peace. And this is universal. This is true for all of us. There is no other thing. If you're in your head, you won't feel it. If you're still worried about the day-to-day stuff, you're not going to feel it. But if you truly step away from everything and just experience this inner world, you will automatically feel peace. Because something within you is radiating peace. Something within you is radiating a timeless presence. And in the company of that, in the association of that, you will find yourself at home. You will find yourself in a place that refreshes you, energizes you, and makes you feel alive. That is your true self. So that is the nature of absolute reality. So how do you get to that? How do you find your way there? So here Krishna is explaining, being purified by your intelligence, controlling the mind with determination, giving up the objects of sense gratification, being freed from attachment and hatred, one who lives in a secluded place and eats little, who controls the body and the tongue, and is always in trance and is detached, who is without the false ego, false strength, false pride, lust, anger, and who does not accept material things, such a person is certainly elevated to the position of self-realization. So this is the typical yogic process. Can it be achieved in the city, in your life, right here, right now? Based on my experimentations, I would say the answer is yes. You can achieve what was possible in former times by going off into the forest and living a very ascetic kind of life. You can achieve that right here, right now. Of course, it's not the same. It's so much nicer to be in the countryside, to be living in a forest, in an ashram, in a place where there's no disturbance. But I think here is where the real challenge is. Here, you get to really test your mettle, really get to test yourself. Here, you get to see, you think you're peaceful, you think you've arrived, you think you're this, that, and the other. So, cool, self-realized you think you might be. But hey, the world will come and throw its stuff at you. People, relationships, work, it will test you. And in that test, you will find out where you really are at. There's nothing to test you. You might think, oh, I have attained so much. I am so great. And you can delude yourself. But the world is a wonderful measure of where you're at. And if you find your mind wandering, going here, going there, well, your first step really is tame your mind, right? Being purified by your intelligence and controlling the mind with determination. Determination. You must assume power over your mind. Either you will be a puppet in the hands of your mind, it controlling you, you're here, and this is the mind, it controls you. You are its slave, you are its toy, you are doing whatever it tells you, or you will become the master of your mind and you will direct it and you will tell it what is okay and what is not okay. You will be the one that discerns what is in integrity with you at a soul level and what is not. What is the reality that aligns with the soul and what does not? Because the truth is here, not here. Wisdom is here, not here. Everything you seek is here. So once you get your mind to be working for you and in alignment with you, then you're able to actually walk in this world with a sense of self-awareness and self-realization. How many of you have had that experience of where you're confused about something and then you turn within to seek an answer and you found, oh yeah, there's something within you that gives you that inspiration or gives you that idea, and it works perfectly and beautifully. Have you had an experience like that? Have you had an experience where you're facing a lot of difficulty and turmoil, maybe at work, maybe in a relationship, and then you take some time out to be quiet, just to still your mind, and suddenly the solution, the answer pops into your head, and boom, there it is. Have you ever had that happen?
Yeah.
Who's that? Vibha? Krishna? Is that you?
Yeah, that was me.
Want to share?
Yeah, I was just like quitting my previous job was a big thing, but it happened after meditating for a long time. The answer came and I finally took the decision to quit.
So when the answer came, how did it come? Did you have to mull your way through it? Or did it pop into your head? Or did you...
It was like a nudge.
A little nudge. Oh, really? Yeah. So tell me about that. How was that?
Basically, it was a very toxic environment, but like whenever I would go in the nature, like I would go in this woods and then I would just meditate for some time and then it would just like come up, quit your job.
So you heard a little prompting from within your head saying, quit your job.
Yeah.
Right? There it is. Very simple, very clear. And whenever you had the thought, how did it feel?
Very calming and peaceful.
Very calming and peaceful. So whenever you get a nudge from within, coming from the depths of your being, from your soul, from your essence, or from God, you receive that guidance, it will always feel very uplifting and freeing. It will never be something you've got to think through. Thinking is a old-fashioned system. It's sort of an outdated, antiquated, primitive way of dealing with the world. I'm not saying it's redundant. I'm saying it has its place. But when it comes to higher level thought, decisions you've got to make, major things that you need to do, thinking doesn't take you there. Say maybe sometimes. But I would say the best decisions are made when you're not thinking. They'll just pop into your mind. And if you've learned to trust that, and if you've learned to follow that, it's very powerful. The biggest insights, the biggest wisdom, the deepest, the things that will grow you the most, they come spontaneously, not as a result of thinking. Thinking is a process. If this, then that, what if I did this, what if I did that, suppose this, then what would this person do, then what would happen? That is all thinking. This is a web. But in that web, you lose clarity. In that web, you lose a sense of the deep, bigger picture. Does anybody else relate to what I'm talking about? Okay, then Krishna comes to one of my favorite, one of the verses that I really love in the Bhagavad Gita. He says, Brahma bhuta prasanatma na sochati na kankshati samha sarveshu bhuteshu mad bhaktim labhate param. One who is thus transcendentally situated at once realizes the supreme Brahman and becomes fully joyful. The word used here is prasan atma. The soul becomes fully joyful. The person who is Brahma Bhuta, or meaning one with the Absolute, becomes Prasanna Atma, a fully joyful soul. Such a person never laments nor desires to have anything. He is equally disposed to every living entity. In that state, one attains pure devotional service unto me. Mad bhaktim labhate param. It's not, you see, most people think that the attainment of God is about becoming one with God. That's just the beginning. Becoming one with God means becoming aligned with God. Becoming aligned means being in step with, working in harmony with, right? That is why the importance of meditation, connecting with your inner self, and then learning how to live in harmony with your soul, to follow its guidance, its prompting, and its way, right? So the way of the soul, actually learning how to follow that. Now, as you begin to become one with the divine, with God, then what happens is there are certain symptoms that begin to manifest within you. Firstly, you become joyful. Joyful means here, this Prasanna Atma refers to being joyful for no reason at all. Nothing has to happen for you to be joyful. You are joyful just like that, for nothing. Normally in the world, for us to be happy, something needs to happen. I get a new job, I get a new car, I get a house, my desire is fulfilled, and I'm happy for a moment. And then after a few moments or a few days, I'm on to the next thing. But it's not a permanent state that I'm in. It's not something I can access instantly. That is the difference. Where the soul becomes joyful, and now you are in a natural state of joy. That joy is not dramatic. It is not something big. Like, hey, I got my promotion or whatever. It's not that kind of thing. It's a quiet kind of joy. It's an inner joy that is consistent, steady. Think of it like ripples on a lake compared to big waves of an ocean. Like that's what it would be for the mind, for the ego. When the mind or the ego gets what it wants, it has waves of happiness. And then when it doesn't get what it wants, it has waves of sorrow. When things go your way, you're happy. When things don't go your way, the way you would like, then you're unhappy. But Prasanna Atma refers to where the soul is joyful, and that kind of happiness does not have a cause. It is causeless. Okay? Samha sarveshu bhuteshu. This person is equal to all living entities, loves everyone. It doesn't matter which country you're from. It doesn't matter what gender you are. It doesn't matter whether you're young or you're old. Loves everyone equally. Whether you're an animal or a human, loves everyone. All creatures, all beings. Samha sarveshu bhuteshu. And then comes the final stage. Mad bhaktim labhate param. This person then attains to the state of devotion towards God, which is the ultimate destination of spiritual growth. Labhate means the gains. Gains, the highest, most transcendental form of spiritual growth, which is bhakti. Bhakti or devotion towards the divine or God. Here Krishna says, Mad bhaktim. Bhakti becomes devoted to me. It's a very profound verse. And then he comes to the next one, which is equally powerful. Bhaktya mam abhijanati yavan yaschasmi tattvataha yato tato mam tattvato gyatva vishate tad anantaram. One can understand the Supreme Being as he is only by bhakti, by devotion. And one who is in full consciousness of the Supreme, by such devotion, can enter into the kingdom of God. So it's not about simply believing in something. It's not about just having faith in something. No, there are symptoms. There are very clear symptoms and indicators by which one can see and understand the level of evolution of a particular soul. Like Krishna has pointed out in the earlier verse, he's equal to all creatures. He is happy for no reason, right? This person then develops devotion towards God. And in that state of devotion, meaning doing everything in the state of devotion and serving all, devotional service, really, serving God through serving creation, serving life. And when one is in full consciousness of the Supreme Lord by such devotion, he can enter into the kingdom of God. Right? Vishate, that is, sorry. Tato mam tattvato gyatva vishate tad anantaram. So, one wonders, what is that kingdom of God? What is he talking about? Let me tell you a little bit about that. So, the material world in the Vedas is described as a tiny part of the entire creation, with all our billions of galaxies stretching millions of light years. All of that, right? All the galaxies, all the novas, supernovas, all the countless universes, and within all of them are compared to a cloud on the spiritual sky. The spiritual sky, the spiritual world, is the rest of creation. So this is just a tiny little part of it. Maybe consider it to be 10, 20, 25% at most of the entire creation, the whole material manifestation. Then there is the spiritual world. The spiritual world is self-illuminated, as he says earlier in the Gita. Self-illuminated means it does not need a sun or a moon or stars or any of that. It is self-illuminated. Everything is self-effulgent. Like everything is radiating light. Everywhere there is light. Every atom is radiating light. Within this light, which many people aspire to go to, many spiritual seekers want to go and merge with the light. Yes, that is very much a possibility. But within that light lie planets on which live spiritual beings, beings in spiritual form, not physical form, but spirit form. That spirit form has no birth, no death, no old age, no disease. And there one gets to be in the association of God. Now, what is it that one does out there? A lot of people, have obviously questioned that, and the answers that many religions gave them was, oh, God is there sitting on a throne and there are angels playing harps. But that's not how they describe it in the Vedas. They talk about the Leela that Krishna exhibited when he came here, the pastimes that he exhibited, wherein he showed what it's like to be with God. God, he presented himself as a playful being, fun-loving, celebrating, dancing, singing, a musician, kids jumping on his shoulders, romancing with just a life of ecstasy and joy. So when we talk of being with God, it is not about some boring little place to go to, but rather if you read the Leela of Krishna, the stories of Krishna in the Krishna book, you get a glimpse of what life in the spiritual world looks like, because that's what he comes to show us. He comes to this world for two reasons. One is to show us what life in the spiritual world looks like so that we may be attracted and wish to come back home. And the other is to annihilate the miscreants who are creating trouble on the planet, and to help and support the devotees, those loved ones who are here. So that is the purpose for Krishna's coming to this world. And that is the spiritual world that he refers to and invites us back to come home to him. That world is known as Vaikuntha, and beyond Vaikuntha is Goloka, the planet of Krishna himself. Any questions? I've got a lot of material here for you. And I'd love to know what your thoughts are.
What did you mean by the last part, the world of Krishna, the planet of Krishna?
That's where he personally is. There are other planets of different... So people approach God in different ways, and they have different ways in which they conceive of God. Each one of those conceptions has a different planet within the spiritual world. So if you are a Ram Bhakt, the follower of Ram, there is a planet for you. And if you are looking at Vishnu, then there is a place for you. But if you want the ultimate, the most magical, the most playful, the most romantic version of God, the embodiment of love, then there is the planet of Krishna. That is where you experience the highest ecstasies of love. That love, even if experienced out here, has been, people who have experienced it have gone into such rapture and ecstasy and such incredible states that would be unattainable for a person, no matter how great the love of your life might be. That love which is experienced by those who experience love of God is 1,000,000 times more than the greatest love affair you've ever had. And this has been shown again and again by people like Meera and Chaitanya, and even amongst the Christian mystics like Teresa of Avila and so on. They have also exhibited those symptoms. One who experiences that quality of love isn't interested in anything else. Any others?
I have a question.
Sure,
you just talked about a while ago, and maybe it's not something that you can completely describe, but I'm always confused when I hear that you became human after going through many lives.
Okay.
I'm always confused.
Why? What is the confusion?
So the confusion is, so how did I get here?
How did you get here?
How did I get here? So I have been evolving for like millions of years to get here.
Right.
And then what happens after I'm done here as a human?
Okay. So which is the question you want me to address? The one that is, why did you get here in the first place? Or when did you get here? Or when do you get out of here?
And then where do I go?
Okay. The so where do you go, I think we've just been talking about, right?
Okay.
That was the where do you go? You could go into the light, or you could go into one of the spiritual planets and there have a spiritual form, non-physical, right? And be with God. So that is the place where you go. The light, you merge with the light. But if you choose to continue as an individual, then you don't try to merge, because the devotee does not want to merge with God, doesn't want to merge into the light, but wants to have a relationship with God. So there are two possibilities, and both are equally valid. There's completely a choice on your part. Now, the earlier question you're asking is that, why do we go through all these different life forms to get to the human form of life? Because the idea is to burn through our desires for all kinds of excitement. Like, think of it, being in different animal or insect or whatever forms is like going to a Disneyland. It's like going to an adventure park for the soul. It gets to experience all these different ways of being. And as far as time goes, since time does not really matter for the soul, it lives in a timeless world of eternality. Even if it were to take millions of years for you to get to the human form, and actually it doesn't take millions of years. You go through those life forms pretty fast because their life span isn't very long. So you go through this entire process with the idea that by the time you get to the human form of life, hopefully you would have started saying, hey, what the heck's going on? Why am I here? What's this all about? But not everybody does. Some do. And those who do start seeking answers and start wanting to know, which is like you're doing right now. Beautiful to hear all the questions and all the ways in which you're seeking. That is the purpose of human life. And if we don't use that, the human life, for some form of pursuit of spirituality. Or it could be religion too. That's still a pursuit. That's still following the path. If you don't use it for any of it, then you return back into all those different species until you come back to the human form of life. But as long as you are utilizing it in some way to pursue your understanding of the divine, directly or indirectly, and I would say there's a lot of people who do it indirectly. It's not necessarily that everyone is directly seeking. Some are seeking in very indirect ways. Even then, the chance is there. I mean, for example, I've heard it said that people who are addicts, right, or addicted to something, therein is their own spiritual search. They're searching for spirit. They're searching for something more than the world is telling them, and they're not finding it, and so they turn to some kind of addiction or other. Hopefully by their next human life, or some even possibly in the same human life, they'll begin to find and seek more direct ways of connecting with that spiritual force.
Thank you.
Welcome. Would anyone else like to ask anything before I move on? Then comes a few other really nice verses. The next one, Krishna says, though engaged in all kinds of activities, my devotee under my protection reaches the eternal and imperishable abode by my grace. So he doesn't talk about giving up the world, but sometimes he does. That is one path. And then there is another path where you're engaged in all kinds of activities. You're engaged in all the worldly stuff. Many great kings, for example, in the past, and many great and many wealthy people were engaged and completely devoted to God while still being very much a part of the world. So it's not that one has to give up the world or be a monk or something like that. No, you find the path that is right for you. But the point is that even though you're engaged in all those activities, you recognize that you are in the protection of the divine. You are God is protecting you. And this is a very big piece to understand, that you are actually being taken care of. There is a beautiful line in the Bible where Christ says, you see the birds and the trees, they neither sow, neither do they reap into barns, yet your heavenly Father provided for them. Are you not much better than they? So there's this sense of trust that he's talking about, this sense of trusting that God has your back, that God is with you, that God is taking care of you as he's taking care of all creatures. You too shall be taken care of. I've followed this understanding for a long time, and I found it to be so true, that as you start developing this idea that God is with me, God is in me, taking care of me, will never let me down, has my back, you will find that it begins to be so. You will find that your trust is always met with that protection. That even though you go through the ups and downs of things happening, again, there's no guarantee that things will happen the way you want. That's not the point. The point is that no matter how things go, you will be protected. You are here to experience all the ups and downs. That will not be taken away from you. But the bottom line is like a safety net. That safety net is there, and you will be taken care of. That is important to understand. And once you know you have that safety net, then it is easy, much easier, to fly to higher heights. It is much easier to be able to soar when you know that in case you don't make it, you are still protected and will be taken care of. It allows you that freedom. And once you have developed that trust, he says, such a person reaches the eternal and imperishable abode by my grace. So another thing you'll recognize is the word grace over here. Grace is a huge part of what happens in our spiritual growth. There are two kinds of spiritual growth Krishna talks about in the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. He says one kind of growth is the kind of growth where it's a do-it-yourself process. You're doing your work, and to the degree that you do the work, you're on your own. It's a DIY process. And then there is the path where you surrender. And in that path, you trust, you surrender, you place yourself in the hands of God, and you allow yourself to be carried by God every moment, really going back to that trust. That trust becomes your boat. That surrender becomes the ship on which you sail through the world. In that state of consciousness, you will find that grace enters into you. Because you're no longer struggling with the world. You're not trying to prove anything. You're not trying to be anything. You have surrendered to the waves, and you are riding them rather than fighting with the world, rather than trying to struggle with the world and trying to make people what they're not, trying to make the world what it is not. That is the struggle we have. But instead of struggling now, you've come to accept people as they are and love them for who they are. You've come to accept the world for what it is, for all the changes that it puts you through, for all the ups and downs that come. And no matter which one comes, the up, you get a lot or you lose a lot, you're ready to ride those waves. As you learn to do that, you will find that you're able to now be in a state of harmony with everything, right? You're equipoised. That's the state you arrive at. So that's similar to surfing the waves of an ocean. See? And in that state, you are able to receive grace. So think about it like this, that when the person learns to ride the waves of an ocean, or learns to ride a bicycle, or learns to dance, very often you have to get out of your head and get into your body and allow your body to find that balance, right? In much the same way, that force which makes that balance happen without you thinking is the same way that grace enters into you and changes you from within. That is to say, you learn to let go your thinking. Okay, I'll give you an example. I was trying to learn salsa and failed, but I couldn't get it because I was in my head. I only went for a couple of classes. It was in my head, and I was getting my feet all crossed up, right? Too much in my head. And the answer I knew, and this was told to me, and I knew I had to do this. If I'd persevered, I'm sure I would have figured that out, is to get out of the head, to feel the music, and to allow your body to be able to do the steps. And if you don't do that, you're not going to make it across. The same with learning how to play music or do anything else. So the same way, that energy which causes you to now skillfully maneuver life, that is grace. And that comes when you stop depending on yourself and start depending on God. When you stop depending on your mind and you start depending upon your spirit. That's when it happens. So the next verse confirms what I just said. Mad chitta sarva durgani mat prasadat tarishyasi atha chetvam ahankaran na saroshi vinashyasi. If you become conscious of me, you will pass over all the obstacles of conditional life by my grace. If you do not work in such consciousness but act through false ego, not hearing me, you will be lost. So let's take both these parts. If you become conscious of me, conscious of God means conscious of the presence of God in everything that shows up in your life. Whether that thing is something you like or don't like, whether that thing is the ups of life or the downs of life, whatever it is, whatever life throws at you, you see that as God coming to you, and you learn to move with that energy without resisting or fighting or struggling. You learn to flow with that. He says, as you become conscious of me, conscious is not just an intellectual thing, it's an awareness. I remember sometimes when difficult situations would come up and I'd say, you again. God, that's a good one. That's a good throw. That's a good try. Right? And you recognize that you're not in a struggle with life, you're not in a battle with life, but you're actually in a game. And it's a game that you can enjoy and that you don't have to fight. Right? It's not about survival, because none of us will ultimately survive. how can I play this to the best of my ability? How can I play it in a way where I get into a flow with whatever's going on? So becoming conscious of God feels like that. And he says, as you become conscious of me, you will cross over all the obstacles of conditional life by my grace. See, that's the beauty of grace. That's the beauty of surrender. That's the beauty of aligning yourself with God. If, however, you do not work in such consciousness and act through false ego, not hearing me, you will be lost. What does it mean to act through false ego? It means I'm acting according to this false sense of self, where I think I have to prove myself, I have to prove my worth, I have to, impress others, I have to make everyone like me. Yeah, that's the false ego, the false self, right? And the real self is the soul. The false self is the ego. So it uses the term false ego or ahankara. Ahankara actually is the Sanskrit word that conveys the idea of ego. If you do not act according to my direction, he's telling Arjuna now, specifically coming back to the battle that they're in right now, and you do not fight, then you will be falsely directed. By your nature, you will have to be engaged in warfare, because Arjuna is a warrior, right? And so that is his nature. That is what he's trained in all his life. And now he's come to the battlefield and he wants to quit and he wants to walk away. And so the whole Bhagavad Gita is spoken for that purpose, to get Arjuna to understand that what his duty is and what he needs to do. Under illusion, you are now declining to act according to my direction, but compelled by your own nature, you will act all the same. The Supreme Lord is situated. Oh, this verse is also so beautiful. The Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart and is directing the wanderings of all living entities who are seated as on a machine made of material energy. Ishvara Sarva Bhutanam, Ishwar, or the Supreme Controller, or God, is seated in everyone's heart. Hriday Shri Arjuna Tishtati. Hriday means the heart. Brahmayan Sarva Bhutani Yantra Rudhani Mayaya. That God is seated in everyone's heart, directing the wanderings of all living entities. In other words, trying to reach out to you. Most of the time we don't listen. Most of the time there's that little quiet voice within us trying to guide us, and we don't listen. Instead, we listen to the noisy mind. We listen to its chatter, and we listen to its doubts, and we listen to its fears. And we ignore the tiny little voice within us that says, hey, you need to quit that job, or you need to do this, or you need to get out of this thing, this relationship, or whatever it is. We ignore that voice and we go for so that's the first voice that comes to you, the quiet voice. And then we go for the noisy voice, the one that is persistent and pushy and all of that, which is the mind. So Krishna is saying, I'm seated in everyone's heart, right? And I'm directing the wanderings of all living. And of course, if you're listening, that is, right? And the living entity is seated on a machine made of the material energy. This machine meaning this organism that we live in, this body-mind organism that we live in. And it's such a tragedy that in today's time, this organism is made to be everything. People are so devoted to their body, so devoted to their mind, so devoted to all of this. But all of this is nashwar, meaning temporary, destructible. It will only be there for some time. And they ignore the most important thing, which is your soul, the journey of the soul, the connection with God. As long as we're ignoring that, we're ignoring the most important part of life. I'm not saying we need to ignore the body or the mind. Those are important pieces as well. The vehicle has to be maintained. If you got a car, you got to get somewhere, you got to take care of that car. But the car is not you. There will come a time you will step out of the car. Then you might come back in. But the car is not you. Similarly, this body and mind organism is not you. You are the one who inhabits this body, body-mind organism. And there is a GPS within this body-mind organism. That GPS is your God positioning, God, something like that, right? Where God is guiding you from within, trying to, at least if you turn it on, if you listen, is there. So the car analogy could work really well to understand that I am the driver of the car, not the car itself. The car is not there to drive me, I'm there to drive the car. Even though you might have an automated car or a car that is self-driving, still you're the one that needs to tell it where to go and direct it. All right, let's stop over here. Any last questions, anything you'd like to know further?
I just think that last part that you read is so beautiful. About God being in our heart and that little voice whispering to us that's directing us.
Yeah.
Often don't listen to is actually God.
That's right.
Yeah.
And if you really unpack it, if you really sit and listen, I have written pages and pages of stuff. Beautiful things just from that inspiration, just from that guidance. I encourage you, take the time to listen to that voice, to journal with it, to write what it's there to tell you, and see for yourself. It is the most beautiful thing that will ever happen to you. Has any of you ever tried or experimented or explored that possibility? No, in that case, try. Remember, if you're thinking, if you're rationalizing, if this, then that, what about, that's not it. The words, the guidance from God just pops into your head. Literally just pops into your head. It's like just there. Krishna was giving that example as well. And I think some of you may have experienced, I'm sure everybody's experienced it. It's just that you may not have joined the dots. You may not have realized, oh, this is what's happening. I am being guided. God is there with me, supporting me, helping me. Reflect in your own life as you go about your evening today. Where did you receive such guidance? Where did you get some inspiration that perhaps changed your life, or that perhaps changed the course or the trajectory of what you were doing? Perhaps it was in the choice of a career, maybe it was in the choice of a partner, maybe it was in the choice of buying a house, or somewhere where out of the blue that voice spoke to you and you did something entirely different because of that. Maybe this is not where you want to share it, but I hope that you will at least go back and reflect on that. And then how can you deepen that connection? Because I'll tell you this, the more you actually listen to that voice and trust it, the more it will reveal to you, to the point where literally, as I said, you can have entire dialogue with God. You can have full out conversations with God. You can have full out communication just like you would with any other person. That is the possibility that is there for us. It happened in my life, so I know it can happen in anybody else's. I knew this one person who was one of my mentors, and he said to me, "You got too many questions. I can't answer all your questions." He says, "Why don't you talk to God directly?" So he took me to this temple and he introduced me there. He says, "This is Banke Bihari temple in Vrindavan, India." And he says, "Talk to the deity in the temple." And I said, "What are you talking about? How can you talk to a deity? There's a stone statue there. You can't talk to that. And plus there's hundreds of people here pushing and shoving, and how am I ever going to do that?" He says, no, just go. I'll introduce you. Introduce me? What are you talking? And thus began my conversations with God, standing in the middle of a crowded, busy temple, people talking, singing, chanting, shoving, pushing, all of that. And I just hold on to a pillar there and keep talking. Its voice was going on inside my head, this conversation. And I can tell you this is possible for all of us. Then I said, "Okay, I can't do this anymore out here because you want me to write." I said, I can't stand here and write. This is too crazy out here. So I said, come to me where I am. And that's what happened next. I began to write on the laptop. We have our conversations that way. But usually I found he was not too interested in talking about my mundane stuff. It was more about the big picture stuff. Things about, questions about life, the things we're talking about here, that kind of stuff. So I encourage you, try your own conversations with God. Try your own listening. You start small. Just start trusting that inner voice that is there. And then see, little by little, as you begin to trust it, it'll start talking to you more and more and more. Remember this, the symptom of there are three kinds of voices. The voice that is of your soul, or the voice that is from God, will always be very soft, gentle, uplifting, empowering. The voice of your mind will always be very contrived. If this, then that, what, suppose this, then you're in your head. You're processing, you're thinking, you're analyzing. That is the mind. And then there is a voice that is what I call the darkness, which is trying to demean you, put you down, tell you you're worthless, you're not good enough, something is wrong with you. It's a destructive energy. Three kinds of voices. And it's up to you to choose which one you want to be spending most of your time with. Okay. Any last thing, or shall we wind up for tonight? All right. Have a wonderful night. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all of you being consistently here. It so satisfies my heart that I can share these things with you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Lots of love.
Thank you.
Thank you. This was a beautiful sharing tonight.
Thank you. Thank you.
I really liked it. The difference on, the different voices that you hear, and they like how it's up to us to kind of choose which one we're going to listen to. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's such a great reminder.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.